You read the title, you're a little upset. I understand, but if I may, let me feed you some warm milk and bounce you on my lap to simmer you down so I can defend my opinion on Bong Joon-ho's newest movie, Mickey 17. I feel like most of you know this by now, I'm a huge fan of his work. In particular, no surprise, Parasite. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I couldn't stop glazing this film when it came out. My nuts were running on empty, dangerously so. I love that movie. I also love Bong Joon-ho. I think he is one of the better directors with an unbelievable amount of talent delivering really memorable, unique pieces. Bong Joon-ho and Banger goes together like peanut butter and jelly. But that being said, I think Mickey 17 is his weakest work so far. I don't think it's bad, not by any means. I don't think this is a bad movie. I did still enjoy the film. I think the visuals are top notch. I love what they did with the sound, especially when it came to the aliens. Like, there was a lot to like about this movie and a lot that I did like about this movie. I just also happen to think that it's Bong Joon-ho's weakest film so far. I think there's a lot of elements in this film that didn't work super well and kind of led to it being a bit disjointed and messy. So, let's just get into it. First and foremost, I really like Robert Pattinson in this movie. I think he did an extraordinary job. He has become one of my favorite actors, which that's like the coldest take imaginable. Most people have been really suckling on that Robert Pattinson bosom. Like, he is the truth. Like, that man is an unbelievable actor choosing some really fun roles. And he does a great job in this movie. And he gets to play two different versions of his character here that are wildly different. And he does a great job with that. So, the film is about Mickey Barnes. Mickey Barnes gets into some hot water with a buddy of his, and they deduce that the only way to get out of this pickle is to go on this big space expedition to another world, which is led by a politician who's taken a ton of people and they're going to go to a new planet. And he signs up to be an expendable, which is someone that gets reprinted every time they die. So the role is Mickey will do some very dangerous things, die, and then get reborn again the next day with all his memories intact. We go through an MLG montage of Mickey deaths where he has died on the job 16 times. You don't see all 16, but you see some of the big moments. And we follow Mickey number 17. And just like when the toilet paper rips when I'm wiping my asshole, a happy little accident happens to Mickey 17 where a Mickey 18 gets printed while he's still alive. Now there's two Mickeys. And the film, at its core, is a dark comedy. And I think it does pretty well in that regard. It is a well-written comedy. And as you would expect from a Bong Joon-ho film, there's plenty to unpack with it. There's a lot of metaphors and symbolism. But in that department, I feel this is his most straightforward film he's made. It's pretty on the nose with all of the things it wants to express to you, the viewer. And I feel like most people will be able to pick up on it pretty easily. Well, I mean, I guess maybe. There's fucking people that think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. So, maybe not, but I think in terms of his entire catalog of films, Mickey 17 is the one that is the most straightforward in kind of like drilling and driving home the messaging pretty clearly for the most part. That's not to say all of it is, but overall, I think most people will be able to pick up on pretty much everything he wants to get across with it. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I wanted to mention it because following Parasite, I feel like a lot of people, and myself included admittedly, go into this movie expecting like really deep layers, like an onion you can never really get to the middle of. Like there's always tons of discussion you can have and a lot of like debate on what certain things meant. With Mickey 17, I don't really see that happening because it does feel like everything's very straightforward. Which, for some people, that might even be more of a positive thing. Maybe you didn't like to engage with his art to that level, like with Parasite. So maybe this would be more your speed, and I think that's fine. But I just wanted to mention it here. Now I want to get into like the actual complaints I have. This movie has a lot of characters in it, and a lot of the characters don't really go anywhere. They are there as a caricature of something that never like actually plays a role in anything, and by far the weakest part of this film, I think, is the ending. Really, the last, 25-ish minutes, I think, are just super fucking flat. It feels really rushed. I don't know what went wrong. It really feels like that wasn't the original direction. It just feels like we gotta speed run this, and it feels like they started cutting things out to get to that point. I'm not going to get into too big a I am going to get into some spoilers, but I'll give you a warning when I get to there. I just really think like the entire last 25 minutes just get really flat and fall into like a really kind of cliche, very rushed ending that almost felt like it was made for like a PG-13 family film type ending that I think really clashed with everything else the movie was setting up. I feel like that's probably a pretty hot take because it seems like a lot of people really do love everything about this movie. I just don't, unfortunately. I wish I did, but I'm just going to sit here and be honest with my thoughts on it. So another thing, as I mentioned, the movie is a dark comedy. A lot of Mickey's deaths are played off as a joke and sometimes just used as a punchline when he gets his hand cut off and like the people are talking about it like they just watched a touchdown. They're like, whoa, did you guys see that? That was incredible stuff. His hand just fucking flew right off of him. And overall, I do think it works. But Mark Ruffalo's character, Kenneth Marshall, and his wife, by extension, these two are actual cartoon characters. When they are on screen, it is so over the top to the point that it feels like you're watching a Mad TV sketch. I swear to God, there's a scene where Mark Ruffalo is doing the Chris Farley van down by the river movements. Like, it is very clearly hamming it up to the upteenth degree, which I do think could have worked if it wasn't so far removed from how every other character in the movie interacts with the world around them. Everyone else plays very silly things seriously. These two play everything silly. And I just don't think that it meshes super well. Kenneth Marshall is the political powerhouse, and his wife is kind of his, right hand, also kind of his handler. And together, every villain is lemons. Like, they are the evil duo. And his wife is just, like, her character can basically just be boiled down to one word: sauce. She says the word sauce more times than Amy Schumer says vagina. Every scene she's in, she's talking about sauce. Can you cut off some alien tails, maybe even torture them a little bit to help improve the flavor of my sauce? And the whole time she's like shaking a sauce. It just got so annoying, and I get there's a deeper meaning behind the sauce, but I was so tired of hearing from the fucking sauce sorceress just drone on and on about it. Now, there were some good scenes, though, with Kenneth Marshall. Mark Ruffalo was obviously channeling a Donald Trump impression for his whole performance as Kenneth Marshall, and there were some moments that I do think were really good scenes. But overall, these two characters, I felt like they were just so different from how everyone else in the movie was that it just felt like it just clashed with it. So I don't think it meshed overly well. Now I'm going to get into spoilers for some of my, bigger complaints, because even that I don't even think is that big of a deal. Like, they weren't bad by any means. It's just, it didn't work super well. Now, I'd really like to kind of dive into what I briefly mentioned at the beginning with the ending. I just really think the ending was very rushed. I don't like what they did with the aliens. They established the aliens very early on as these, sympathetic, cutesy creatures. They're making little squeaky sounds, and they are what saved Mickey 17 in the beginning and lead to this whole chaotic hootenanny that happens with two Mickeys existing at the same time. I don't want to just regurgitate the plot of the movie to you, but it's important that I mention this for what I'm about to talk about. The aliens do play a role at the end of the film again. They come back around. The two Mickeys are in jail, as well as the woman they're in love with, Nasha, who is also a security head on the ship. And Mickey 17 is explaining, why didn't the aliens just eat me? And Nasha just point blank explains to Mickey, as well as the audience, no, the aliens are the good guys. They were saving you. And he's like, oh, you're right, they saved me. Yeah, they're the good guys. And that kind of sets the stage for how the rest of the final act plays out, where they just explain everything to you. They just tell you everything. So she even has, a really good speech about how stupid Kenneth Marshall is, and, we're the aliens here, you dumb motherfucker. The aliens are the good guys. They just want their baby back that we're dangling over a fucking pit of lava. This and that. Explaining, the aliens are the good guys, we're the bad guys, kind of thing. And it's just all being hammered home pretty directly, and also there's a couple of, really big ass pull moments where, a scientist that we'd seen a couple of times throughout the film approaches Mickey 17 going, boop, 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 oh, boop, 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 and Mickey 17's like, boop, 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 boop. And she's like, yes, exactly. They speak a language. I'll make a translator. And then 2 minutes later, she comes up to Mickey and's like, here's the translator I just made. And Mickey is able to use that translator to speak fluently, easily, with the aliens now, speaking to the mother of all the aliens, and they're just having this conversation back and forth. And it's like, what the fuck? What do you mean you just threw this together that quickly? Holy shit. So, like, they now have this translator out of nowhere with, like, no setup or build up to it at all. They've just immediately mastered this language so they can communicate between the two of them. And I won't just, like, get into everything that happens at the end, but I just really felt like everything just rushed through the end. Like, there wasn't a whole lot left to, like, unpack because they were just explaining, vomiting everything to you through the conversation with the aliens and each other about, like, it turns out there were some spies, you know, amongst them that were analyzing all the bad stuff Kenneth was doing, and they were filming the whole thing. It's like, you're evil, you're out of line, you're offline, and they point guns at him, and now it's a mutiny. It's like everything just all of a sudden just starts happening. Like, okay, aliens are good guys, you were the bad guys, we know you're the bad guys, so now we're the good guys stepping in. And there's not a whole lot left to, like, dig into anymore. It's just now it just feels like the end to what I mentioned earlier, like a family film. Like, oh, these cute aliens, there's going to be a happy resolution there, and all the bad guys are going to get their justice, their just desserts. Great. And it's pretty simple. Now, maybe I'm a bumbling oaf who is, at the very end, just not picking up on any of the deeper meanings to a lot of what was happening. Like, at the very end, when it came to Mickey 17 and a certain button, there was absolutely a deeper meaning with a lot of the sequencing that happened there. I get that. But everything with the aliens and the way that they, get the bad guys, I felt just really was underwhelming and like really kind of rough. Another thing I want to mention, so many characters, and you're not going to give a fuck about any of them except for Mickey, and maybe Nasha. I imagine most people won't even remember a lot of the other characters' names, even though so many of them were thrown in for quite a few scenes, because it just never coalesces to anything with them. The reason I say maybe Nasha is because she doesn't get a whole lot of fleshing out throughout the film. She falls in love with Mickey at first sight. She invites him over to eat with her, and they just immediately fall in love. And it just kind of stays that way. Like, we don't get a whole lot about her. Like, we don't learn a lot about her. We know she's a badass, and especially at the end, she showcases that. And then when she does, like, deliver her speech about, like, how fucked up all of it is, that's, like, the first time we actually hear from her outside of just how much she loves Mickey and how much she's been there for Mickey. So, like, the only character that gets any real fleshing out is Mickey. Yet they introduce so many. So it just feels kind of messy to have all of these characters and just not give a fuck about most of them. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of interesting ideas that were explored and then just abandoned. Like, there was a lot of stuff they set up early on. Like, for instance, the technology for printing the expendables, that was developed by a fucking serial killer. And he'd use it as a way of having a pretty bulletproof alibi. And then, when eventually he was caught, it led to a huge discussion about, well, who's guilty? Are they both guilty? Because they're two separate people now. So, like, what exactly do you do? And, like, it was a really interesting idea that doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't really surface again past, like, the narrator explaining it. Like, Mickey is walking us through how we get to this point, and it's something that he briefly talks about, but it's never, like, a concept that they really go down in any big way. And I just felt like that would have been cool. Like, I feel like there was a lot of things that they started and then didn't finish. That would have been really cool had they had done that. You know what I mean? Anyway, though, I've been yapping about this for a while. I don't dislike the movie. I enjoyed it. I had fun watching it. But I do think it is Bong Joon-ho's weakest film so far. I would still recommend watching it. Like, it is a good movie. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't somewhat disappointed with it. That's really about it. So,